How's everybody doing today?
Right.
Good. Bring some coffee, please. Thank y'all for making a commitment to be here today. I know it was hard for everyone with that rain coming down to not roll over. So thank y'all for getting up and coming out. We're delighted you're here. By the way, I'm Carl Blackman with the Chamber, and usually this is not my role. Usually we throw Macon Lovelace as the chair of this committee, but today we've reversed roles and he's going to be on the panel. So I get to prompt him today, but we're thrilled that you're here to talk about something that's absolutely important and vital for us, which is economic development. So we got a esteemed group of folks with us today, and is that fair? Yes, that's fair. We're gonna keep this light, okay, but bring the heat when it's time for y'all to bring questions, okay? They can handle it, but it's we've got right now in the Midlands and Columbia as a whole and across South Carolina, we're seeing significant projects and interest in South Carolina as it relates to economic development. Last month, Commerce presented to a group I was in, and we had 570 projects that are active in South Carolina. They had over 25 new projects just looking in November alone, and they had 22 of the 570 projects were over $1 billion. I mean, that is significant. One, not gonna land all of them, right? But the reality is that the projects that are looking at South Carolina, a lot are in the EV, electric vehicle marketplace. A lot are just playing the game of looking in the Southeast because of the population migration that we've seen over the last 10 years. But also they're looking at, for reasons, non-unionized, cheaper land, cheaper labor, et cetera. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but the interest is real in South Carolina. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but specifically around this marketplace. And we applied to, Macon was in charge of putting some context around this, and so he was able to bring these guests. So Macon, I'm gonna first let you introduce yourself and your company, and then I'm gonna get you to mention why you asked these two esteemed gentlemen.
I'll be happy to do that. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And for those of y'all that don't know me, I'm Macon Lovelace. I'm with Trinity Partners. Trinity Partners is a full service brokerage firm. Property management, brokerage, construction management. We have 4 offices in the Carolinas, 180 employees, 40 in South Carolina, about 32 in Columbia. I've been in this business for 16 years. Initially was a banker in Columbia. Worked for First Citizens Bank, so very grateful for them for taking the risk on me and letting me learn about the market. And I'm married with a lovely wife, Betsy, and two wonderful children. And a little background on why I asked these two guys to come. First starting with Kevin. Believe it or not, this brings the chamber all together. Kevin and I met in the leadership of Columbia about 16, 17 years ago. And I was a young 20-something-year-old banker that was intrigued by his big development company. And I would plug him with a bunch of questions. We were on field trips about how you finance deals and what you were building. Have stayed in touch. Kevin's in the industrial space with Magnus Partners, previously in Lower Valentine. And, and the main reason why I asked Kevin to be here today, you'd also be very thankful for him, because Kevin and his partner Bill took a leap of faith in building speculative industrial product here when nobody else was doing that. It's now a sexy commodity in the Midlands in South Carolina, and you have 6 or 7 competitive developers in Indianapolis that are now Indianapolis, Atlanta, Charlotte are now coming down to Philadelphia and infiltrating Kevin's market. That basically justifies the risk that he took and the investment he's made in Columbia and covering the industrial manufacturing space. That's why I wanted him to come. And Frank and I came up in this same time. We were competitive firms, and we're pretty close to the same age. And I wanted to bring Frank along because Frank's been very vital in filling the role of a non-institutional investor developer in Columbia. And why that's important to kind of break it down. You have a lot of institutional investors that are looking across the state. What that means is they want to invest $10 to $20 million of equity, which is effectively $30 to $60 million projects. There aren't a lot of those that happen in Columbia. You see them in the large industrial space, but Frank's been very unique to bringing revitalizations for Main Street first. And now a lot of his multifamily projects you see around town, Rosewood, Main Street, just announced Full Street. Is that right?
Yes.
And he also does a lot of retail development as well. So I thought they would complement and also, trying to highlight developers we have here in Columbia that have made the investment when others wouldn't have done it. So I appreciate y'all both being here today.
All right, so let's start, Frank. Who, what, when? Let's talk about you, the background of you and your company, and some of the specifics of what y'all looking for in this market.
Well, thank you for having us. And just to be clear, I'm younger than Macon. We just said that. Yeah. So I'm with Cason Development Group. There are 7 of us. So me and here today. We focus on 2 different areas. So around the state, we focus on national retail projects primarily. And most of that we do is build to suit and kind of merchant build products. So we typically build those and sell them. So, that looks like our most active client right now, probably Starbucks, Taco Bell, stuff like that. And we kind of build that and sell it typically. Inside of Columbia, we're broader and more opportunistic in what we do. So to make its point, really our focus in Columbia is on projects under $30 million, which pretty much puts us under institutional capital, which puts us under the competition for that as well. So we think there's plenty of opportunity in Columbia, and what we've focused on is primarily infill projects, office, retail, multifamily, and we started doing light industrial too. So I think there's plenty of opportunity in Columbia. We also think that having institutional capital come to Columbia is a great thing. So it's unfortunate that it's not here right now, but once the soil conditions change, and we show that it is a place where we can invest $30 to $60 million, that will start to change in projects other than student housing. So it's great. I mean, it's a great sign that it's happening in the industrial market, albeit probably frustrating times for the developers too, but it's a good sign for the economic climate here.
Thank you. Do me a favor, lean into your mics a little bit so everybody can hear y'all don't mind. Kevin, same question. Talk about your role in your company, about your company, you built company, and then what y'all focus on.
Quick clarification, I also am a little younger than me.
Yeah.
But if you leave it out, I will thank you greatly. But Kevin Werner with Magnus Development Partners. Magnus is a real estate development company, as Macon had said. Our focus is 100% on industrial products. And we really source it in 2 ways. We look at it from a speculative development, which means there's no tenants that are committing to our space. But we're designing it in such a way and such a location that we think that we can allure the right types of tenants that come in. And we've been successful with that model. Where I'd say about half of our company, a little bit more than half today, in a more robust market. The other side of our business is build to suit for lease. And that's when a tenant comes to you and they know what the program is that they're looking for. One example comes to mind, which was a project we did with Domino's Pizza, which was a build to suit or lease back deal where they asked us to finance it, develop it, turn it over to them, lease it back for a certain amount of term. So that is the other side of our business. We have a third leg to the stool, which is a consulting side of the business and a value add side. But today, the speculative side of our business is by far the largest, and the build to suit would follow by the consulting side. But that's our business. I would say, although maybe I'm slightly older than Macon, I've been in the business about 30 years. And so I've developed just about every type of commercial product that there was. And I'd say about 5, 6 years ago, in my heart of hearts, I really wanted to focus on industrial. I saw a long runway and I saw what was happening throughout the Southeast, which was this huge renaissance of investment coming, not just from what we all know is foreign direct investment, FDI, but it was coming internally too. It was coming from, New England areas and Midwestern areas and areas that really just wanted to focus on where the growth was, household growth, population growth, job growth, not to mention some of the port activities that were shifting from West Coast to East Coast. It was very exciting. So, 5 years ago or so, I branched off with my partner, Bill Owen, and we started Magnus Development Partners really to focus on how do we invest in our own backyard, in our backyard definition, the Southeast, with a heavy emphasis on the Carolinas. And we said, well, nothing like starting in your own backyard in your own zip code, because who knows it better than where you see things. So that's the origins of our company. To date, we've had some successes. We've done, I should know this on top of my head, but call it 9 or 10 spec buildings, build-to-suit projects, value-add projects. We really just like to align with where the markets are. But I'll tell you, the last few years, the markets have been on speculative development, creating the space and getting in the way of where people want to be. It's probably a way of backing into what speculative development really is. So, and when we pull out a map, when we first pull out the map, it was pretty easy to put our finger on 77 and 26 is a really key geographic area for distribution, regionally distribution companies that want to be here. So those are the Home Depots, the Lowe's of the world. I mentioned Domino's earlier. We've got companies that they do the same thing as we do when we do our analysis. So that's how we've been able to propel our company forward and really use a spec model to be successful, rounding it out with some specialized build-to-suit activity as well.
Great, thank you. But Frank, you're in the speculative place too, to some degree. I mean, but you use, I'm thinking about your work in Upper Maine, particularly, and that was, we joke about Frank calling the Davy Crockett of North Maine because he was going where no one else had gone. And but some of that work has actually added value back to the city, has actually created growth, much like what Kevin is doing on the industrial side. Talk about what goes into your mind as you are looking at a project, especially in the North Maine area where probably you probably got some pushback a little bit on it. Talk about how your process of what it took to get there.
Yeah, some of our process is hard to see. Because most of us get to see the project when it's at the end, so don't get to see behind the curtain. So North Maine specifically in that area, really, I think we've done close to 10 projects there now. They've all been relatively small, so you kind of, it's not as speculative as it has looked. The area was probably more speculative than the projects itself. So anytime we're looking at a project, we're always weighing the risk. So we're always kind of balancing the risk or quotient of risk-adjusted returns on them. So for something like that, those areas, we knew they were smaller projects. We knew it was an area that was untested, especially like the first project we did was the Warmouth. But we didn't buy a building and sit on it and hold it and wait for the Warmouth. We had a Warmouth who said we want to open a restaurant, and we kind of went there for them. And then we saw, because of that, we saw opportunity in the buildings around there. Which is really a kind of microcosm for the way we see Columbia as a whole. There's so much opportunity that just requires a little bit of vision, a little bit of design, coupled with investment. So that's a lot of what we saw in the Cottontown area, and as one project, we had a success with one project that was kind of built off of itself. And so now there's 250 unit apartment complex that's proposed, and I think they closed on the land for the more Cadillac site. So that really what we did was like the first little pieces, and this is a big piece that I think is really going to change the landscape. That's not our project, unfortunately, but I think that's going to continue to change the landscape out there. So, but we do see that as a microcosm for the way we look at Columbia as a whole too. There's a lot of opportunity there, and these kind of smaller projects that are non-institutional capital projects.
So Macon, we're seeing a ton of, I mentioned just the amount of projects that Commerce is looking at across the state. Richland County and Lexington County are obviously seeing its share of looks today, which we not always have heard about. I mean, it's been for a long time, we have not seen as many projects that have become are here because of a specific reason. One, whether location or water or access to different things, but which we have a great property for projects, but our politics and our regulatory system has not always encouraged development. What are you seeing today versus 2 years ago?
Sure. I would say that a lot of the looks we're getting, take into several factors in consideration. One is if you look at some of the industrial land comps in Charleston and Greenville, Spartanburg, Kevin, feel free to add on, but we're talking about some industrial land comps now that are north of $150,000 an acre. Which, you know, if you look at a site in Columbia, $50,000 to $60,000 an acre is reasonable. So 3 times the land cost. You have that also. You continue to hear the solid labor pool. A lot of the concerns we've heard about Charleston is how do they import employees? You know, are you bringing them from Manning? Are you bringing them from Georgetown? Are you bringing them from Edgefield? That's a long drive, despite the hourly wages. We can't really, you know, it's hard for us to compete with leadership and the governance they have in the upstate. It's going to take, I'm just being honest with y'all, they have a very well-oiled machine up there, have for a long time. And their consolidated chamber and economic development is a factor of all that. They just have very good leadership up there. And so Charleston has been the darling for institutional investment, the port. Spartanburg's been more gelled with the complete package. I think we have a lot of opportunity here because of those markets getting oversaturated. I think there's 20 million square feet of industrial spec product planned for Greenville, Spartanburg County. So if you're looking to invest in that market, that's a lot of competition. There's a lot of things that go wrong. So I feel like we're well positioned, and that's why you've seen Kevin and I were talking about on Friday. I mean, there's Pollitt and there's Technell and there's here this all from the last 3 or 4 years.
You've got Technell, you've got like all their names, guys up in Indianapolis, Mescanel.
Yep, Mescanel.
I mean, you've got real interest from a lot of the national REIT players, major investment in black kind of dollars that are starting to flow through other companies here on the investment side, which we've never seen that before. Right? Yeah. This is brand new to our marketplace, and it's a good thing because it puts more eyes on the center of South Carolina.
Yeah, and all the stuff that you hear. Last thing I'll say is speed to market. So why has Charleston and why has Spartanburg thrived? They have product on the ground. So if you were Oshkosh Defense went into a project in Spartanburg that had been vacated by Friday. They went because it's ready. The infrastructure was there. The jobs were there. For the fact that Kevin and Red Rock, another local developer, John, thank you for being here. I saw John here earlier. And these guys are coming here. It provides products so that there are new opportunities, new projects that come along. These projects ask, where can we land? You're not telling them a story that's 2 years out. You're telling them a story that's potentially 6 months out.
Carl, remember this too. When you just talked about the upstate, how they're just kind of a different market. They also run up and down 85, right? So you have the influence of Charlotte and Atlanta with the upstate in between. And so that has its own kind of commerce area, right? Here we have from Charleston up to Columbia as our segment. And when you think about it, the stress on Charleston right now is incredible. I mean, if you just look at the wetlands alone, forget about some of the other barriers. You've got very limited sites that are available to you. So you get up past Camp Hall, Rizzo, you've got to really jump into Orangeburg and then Columbia. So now all of a sudden we're seeing a lot more activity that's coming from the coast to Columbia versus the other state. Columbia. Just don't see it in that direction.
The halfbackers.
You got it.
Yeah. You know, that it's an interesting point. We talk about the port. The port is by far away the biggest driver of industrial growth in the Carolinas, especially South Carolina. We have led the country for the last 30 years in foreign direct investment, I think, per capita. We finished, they announced that today that they finished dredging, it's been 10 years, 12 years dredging the Charleston Harbor. We're 52 feet, the deepest on the East Coast. And we're seeing crazy things. Like 20 years ago, we saw Boeing building planes and just parts of it and flying them across the country for final assembly in Everett, Washington. Now you're seeing wine getting shipped from California over to Chester to be bottled in South Carolina. Part of what a unique thing, right? Bottling wine in South Carolina. What else is next? What are things that we can see coming or foreshadowing? What does the next 10 years look like? Because if you think about it, we doubled the size of Capacity Port. We've not added one new rail line. We've added maybe about 6 miles worth of interstate, like new lanes. More's to come, but we're spending about $1.5 billion, $2 billion on wide and interstates, which will only make access easier. They're putting in a new rail transfer station down in Charleston, which will be modernized, the most modern facility in the country. What does that mean for us looking forward? Both from a industrial side, but also in Columbia on the retail and commercial side.
I'll take it on the industrial side. You know, what's so exciting to me is this whole EV, electronic vehicle advent, because the supply chains are changing rapidly, right? I think we all thought California was crazy when they said, I think it was 2031, they were all going to go electric, and the rest of the country said, good luck. Well, listen up, it is happening, it's happening quick, coast to coast. I think that's one of the most exciting things that we're seeing here in the Southeast, and we're seeing in South Carolina. I mean, BMW's revamping their format, Volvo's revamping their format. It's not landed yet, but there'll be one of the biggest investments, the biggest investment in South Carolina's history that's going to happen on Camp Hall very shortly. It's related to that industry as well. And we have suppliers now that are starting to land in Columbia because they're servicing both Volvo and BMW, Mercedes as well. And that's, to me, one of the most exciting things that I've seen as far as one industry that's coming in and kind of revamping how this whole supply chain is going to work related to automobile. So that is nothing short of fascinating and welcome. That's a game changer, and we're starting to see it in our industry, and we're starting to see it in our product already. And so it's happening just really, really fast. So I'd say EV is the one that is going to be the leading product out there for years, for generations to come. And it's different in every format. Now, what happens to the old supply chain? I'm not exactly sure yet. Kind of looking on both sides. All this new growth is very exciting, but what happens to these folks that were maybe designed a little bit differently with the gas combustion engines? I don't know exactly how that's going to be for them, but where it's going is very exciting for us.
I mean, I would agree with everything Kevin's saying. The nice thing that I'd like to see, I don't know if it would happen, would be that the Class A ops users that follow professional components of those industries. So you see Charleston having substantial. You have firms that will go to Charleston and will say, I'll lease 20,000 feet and I don't care what it costs because I want to have my young employees downtown. Literally, because they don't care. They're paying $120 per foot in Manhattan. They've made a decision they want to come to Charleston. If a new building is $50 a foot, that's not scaring them all. So what would be nice is in the Columbias, in Greenville and Spartanburg, where we have not as robust of an office market, is figure out some way to parlay those professional services and service these firms and expansions to getting their young employees downtown, because that's the drive and need.
Yeah, I'll go there with that. What Megan's point too is that it all works off of each other, right? So those jobs, the industrial jobs, the higher paying office jobs, which need more residential, which need more retail, et cetera. So we're in the Southeast, which everyone knows is the place to be right now. We're in a state that's pro-business. It has very little union impact. So I think all those factors contribute to fact that we're an attractive place to invest, which is gonna lead to more investment. And then specific to Columbia, I mean, as you're talking, it made me think about Coach Beaver's got us on the train, and why not us? And I think Columbia's gotta be a little bit there right now. I mean, Kevin pointed to the fact that Charleston, there's only so much more that can happen there. Charleston's not slowing down, not stopping, obviously, but for Columbia, if we can create the right conditions here, we do have opportunity, and we can take advantage of the fact that we're in the right region, the right state, in the right time. So, for me, that gets us excited.
You talk about getting the soil conditions right, and y'all heard me, and I will go on my tangent about taxes and cost of doing business here in Columbia, but that is a significant challenge in headwinds as it relates to attraction. When you don't have wind at your back. When you got wind at your back, those are still issues, but not as critical. But what else do we need to do? Because you're hearing, the mayor and Councilman Taylor, I've heard them mention several times recently about the need for growth in the city of Columbia. We need to see density. We've got to increase density. And for that matter, Benjamin and Steve was talking about that quite a bit as well, which is one of the reasons why they did the tax credits for student housing. But relatively speaking, I think Charleston has like 9,000 people live downtown the business district. Greenville has like 6,200 in their business district. We have like 3,300 that live full-time in our business district. So Frank, you've got two places, apartment complexes that just opened up, one on Rosewood, one on Main Street. Not quite sure what your occupancy is on that because it just opened, but we're seeing new apartments quickly being taken up, and for prices they're just unbelievable high. What, as a father with kids back there living in apartments, I'm like, what? So what are you seeing in that market?
Well, to be harsh on Columbia for a second, we have no concept of what density is. I mean, and we're so far behind Charleston and Greenville. Like one of the questions that we get a lot is our competitiveness with Charleston and Greenville. They're gone. We missed them. Like they went by us 10 to 15 years ago. And we're competing with like Augusta and Spartanburg. And we don't think that, but if we don't start thinking that way, then we're gonna get lost by those towns too. And we don't understand density. We propose a 50-unit apartment complex and people freak out. I mean, it's crazy. So it's a mindset shift. It has to happen first. I do think the new council is doing a great job of that. That was the soapbox for me. I do think they're doing a great job at changing the mindset that this is a good thing. We have to have this to grow. Macon was alluding to the fact that people will want to be downtown. The reason they're getting those higher rents downtown Charleston is because it's an attractive place to be. People now can go work wherever they want to work, anywhere. And so they want to work where there are nice restaurants, where there are good retail stores, where there are free, nice public spaces, things like that. So we have to create that stuff in order to be able to get the residents, to get the retail, to get the office, to get the industrial and stuff. I think we've got to shift our mindset to realize how far behind we are, to realize how hard we have to work. We've been surpassed by Charleston maybe 2 or 3 years ago in total population, and that was what we had for 20 years. We were the largest city in the state. We're not that anymore. I don't really know what we are right now. So yeah, I still think there's opportunity here, but only if soil conditions continue to improve. And I think they're doing a really good job as far as the taxes they're a huge issue. People who are not in our industry really don't realize the impact of it. The amount of projects that have been killed by our taxes, the amount of investment that has been stopped by our tax situation. Unfortunately, people don't get to see that. I mean, we see a fraction of it because Macon may have 5 deals that get killed by that. Well, I never knew about those because it's huge. So it's a big issue. I don't know how to fix it.
Kevin, what do you see that needs to be done to help our soil conditions, or what will trigger additional growth from a regulatory standpoint?
I could that's a separate subject all into itself, which is a really fascinating one that's gonna take a little bit more depth here, but I'll give you the kind of maybe the higher level as it relates to industrial is. It is all, you mentioned earlier about the billions of dollars in the roadways. My wife called me, she was traveling in the mess up on 26 right now. I said, she was like, I'm gonna be late because of the traffic in another 45 minutes. And I said, that's a good thing in our industry because that ultimately is gonna really free up pathways, right? And that's progress in the industrial markets because product has to get from point A to point B and a lot of times point C. So I'm wildly excited about what our state's doing. And I think that gas tax is going to really pay off in the long term. Nobody likes that word tax, but as it relates to infrastructure, I sure do. And
Motor fuel user fee.
what, yeah, thank you. There we go. I knew there was a better terminology to that. And then you cannot say the word port growth enough for industrial users. So, again, you touched on that briefly, but those are just absolutely vital. The tax scenario in South Carolina is embarrassing on real property taxes. Everybody hears New Jersey and how expensive that state is from a tax standpoint. Well, we have a tenant of ours that's from New Jersey. He called his first tax, but he said, "This can't be right. This is more than what I pay in New Jersey." I said, "I have to apologize. This is 100% right. This is what you're going to be signed up for the next 10 years." That's not a good conversation to have. And people really are shocked. And then when they can go to other communities that they feel don't have that type of burden, if they really can, some can't, some have to be in a high cost environment from a taxation standpoint. But if they can, they will choose, and they have chosen in multiple times to go elsewhere. And that's a little disappointing. We just have to fix that. It's really bad optics for our state.
Macon, I'll throw that to you. What are you seeing from your clients that things that we, from a regulatory standpoint, need to address?
I'm just gonna give you the most basic example that reiterates what they said. Budman, Columbia Development, did a development on Forest Drive 6 years ago. If y'all ride by, it's kind of non-descriptive there, maybe a wing stop. They developed it as a merchant build and flipped it. And the taxes on the flip were $12.50 a square foot for the tenants. And so to give you all an idea, that was probably 50% of the base rent. That's astonishing. And it was all based on our higher millage rates here, percentages, but also the point of sale law in South Carolina. So it was a new build, there were lower taxes, they set those in the lease. And it's problematic. I mean, that's just that's a hard story to sell and a hard pill to swallow, and it's just something that needs to be done. And back to too much about density, you have to build larger product to spread out the operating costs for stuff downtown. People need to understand that. Barring some tax incentive for new apartments, there's a reason why they built as big as they did next door, because they had to pay $100 a square foot for the dirt and go up as many floors as they can. So if you're not going to have a change or reform in tax laws, you have to allow density to grow in order to subsidize, or not really subsidize, but offset the scale project costs and operating costs.
One last, I'm gonna open up this matter, just for those that are not in the real estate development business, just to put in perspective, from a comparison, there was a national tenant looking to move into Charlotte or open a store in Charlotte and in Columbia, same size parcel. The Charlotte parcel was worth about $4 million. The one here in Columbia was $3 million. That's about right. Taxes in Charlotte were $36,000 a year on that piece of property. They were $96,000 a year here in Columbia. So just to make it sink home, so you can go to Charlotte, one of the largest cities on the East Coast, and pay a third of the taxes. That kind of is stifling if you're looking at development work, but we won't belabor that. All right. Lastly, well, let me open up. Anybody got any questions for this esteemed group?
Macon, this question is for you on the office market, which you touched on a little bit. What do you think? Talk about what's happening post-COVID, and then what do you think to get new offices in Columbia, headquarters attractive here? What does that
Yeah.
take?
I'm actually made some notes this morning. Thank you, Heather. So a lot of y'all may not know this because these buildings are still functional and bills are paid, but they're probably 500,000 square feet of sublease space in suburbs of Columbia. It's pretty ugly. We have the prize of managing, leasing and managing some of these assets, and actually have to have a call with an owner in about 4 hours. Talk about these things, but Staples, Instar, Aflac, Centene is the greatest example. Centene was downtown and in the suburbs. They took 60,000 square feet in Center Point Office Park and spent, I'd say, probably $3 million upfitting that space, bought $2.5 million of furniture, never did it. And so it's not good. I mean, you have, right now there is a user that wants to occupy 80,000 feet that only wants to be downtown. They have a young employee base. And there are very limited options for them to go look at because there's been no new development downtown. What has been developed is backfill. So to answer your first part of your question, the suburban negative absorption is putting overall pressure on the market, and all those back office users aren't coming back because they're deemed non-collaborative, non-professional. They're all back office that is all shrunken working from home. So until the companies like put their flag and say we're coming back to work, and you need to be at a desk, I don't see that changing. And it's a lot of space, and that may not seem like a lot, but 500,000 square feet in Columbia is considerable, and it's northeast Columbia, northwest Columbia. Downtown has been resilient, thanks to Frank and other guys like him making, apartments, and, thanks to the Tommy Halls for opening brands here, or Scott Middleton's and making Columbia more attractive. The people that are going to take office space are willing to pay more. So it would not surprise me to see Bob Hughes do another spec building there, because it's the land and the minis going around there. It would not surprise me to see maybe a third-party new development of an office building that's anchored by a tenant. But the capital markets are very difficult right now for lenders and equity players and new construction. So it's, while I know there's demand, and I can tell you there's demand for that Class A user, that's a hard story to sell without lease demand.
You mentioned identity, and we've talked a lot about Charleston and the upstate here. All the businesses we named in Charleston, not one of them is in Charleston. What is the biggest hurdle when we look at our regional identity in Columbia, which obviously has to include more than the city proper?
Good luck with that one.
Wrong family.
To be clear, you're saying the companies we mentioned are, they're really not in downtown Charleston. They've adopted the identity of Charleston. Yeah, to the benefit of Charleston. We seem unwilling to do that. Yeah.
I will say this, I do think we're making some headway in that direction. You even for a long time, there was political discernment between Lexington and Richland, but if you really think about the airport, usually it's a driver of a name, and it's not the Midlands Airport, it's Columbia Airport. And so you're even seeing a lot more folks on the Lexington side adopt it. So this is Columbia, and so it's not about changing your identity, it's just about a branding. And so I think you'll see some work in next year on some NGOs focused on that. It's my prediction.
I think a lot of that too is downtown Charleston gave everything around Charleston a reason to latch on to Charleston. And downtown Columbia hasn't really given Lexington a reason to latch on to Columbia. Lexington's kind of like, we're actually better than Columbia. We got lower taxes, we got more to do, it's easier to do business here. I think we got to focus on downtown. One of the things we do is focus on downtown and making it a more attractive place, a better place, something that Lexington, that Chapin, that Forest Acres even wants to say we're part of Columbia. Right now, I think all of them want to be separate, but everyone wants to be part of Charleston now. Lansing, Orangeburg. Orangeburg.
How about anybody else got a question? All right, let's think of, obviously, Kevin mentioned this, the electric vehicle EV market is dominant. The Project Camp Hall, $3.5 billion. 3.7 or something like that. The one in Florence, $1.9 billion, should be announced there tomorrow. Significant. What would a project, you got a mega site 20 miles from here up in Fairfield County. What would that mean to our community if we landed a project that size? And Richland County did put some incentives out for a company. I don't think that's a done deal at all, but I mean, it means that folks are looking, which is great. We need some nibbles before we get a bite. But what does that mean for this market across the board?
It's explosive. And just think about it, we're referring to the upstate and Charleston. They have these great OEMs, right? I mean, primarily in the automobile and aviation group. We don't have that one big monster out there that is really pulling a lot of business into our area. If we had that kind of game-changing investment that was happening in our backyard, not only do the suppliers and other folks that want to be doing business with that group, they come very quick. A lot of times they actually beat the marketplace to open up in advance to show their commitment to the end of the company. It's unbelievable. But I think about it more from just a livability, and I have 3 grown children that I would love for them to have those kind of opportunities to work in companies that are right here in Columbia, so they don't have to focus on other areas and then really have access to those types of jobs. And the other thing that doesn't get enough attention is when you have that kind of investment coming into your backyard, you get a lot more entrepreneurial thinking that comes along with it. I mean, you can, I'll use BMW. If there's somebody there that's been turning a lug nut for the last 20 years, all of a sudden he looks down and he says, you know what, I can make a better one of these. And he gets a little double shot going, and then it turns into a bigger opportunity for himself, his employees, and his family, his community, and that just is contagious. We don't see enough of that opportunity here, but that to me would be the most exciting opportunity that we would have, which is not just the obvious that comes with the investment and the suppliers that follow it, but it's the entrepreneurial opportunities that come off that offshoot that I think the younger generation would really be pushing for. It would just be the greatest for our, I can't think of one single better thing for our area.
I'd agree, and the 2 other benefits would be, one, our community, the chamber membership, the nonprofits. I mean, we all feel like poor Blue Cross Blue Shield and Dominion have always been asked for every contribution, what's been done. I mean, you have a $4 billion investment. You probably have 5 or 6 suppliers that come to Columbia that are in excess of $500 million a year in revenue. They're going to be involved in the community and reinvest in the community. So it kind of, gives us a larger base, but also look at the schools. I mean, everybody says, I remember Sanford used to say that Spartanburg County or, the upstate was corporate welfare. Well, the fee and lose work there, because if you look at the schools in Spartanburg County, they're the nicest schools I've ever seen. They're all like college campuses. So something worked in that model of the fee and lieu and growth in the upstate. So I think you kind of see more community involvement, benefactors of the nonprofits, chamber organizations, and then incredible school system addition with Kevin said.
Yeah, I'd love to what Kevin said on that. And changing the culture would be to me the piece of that, because we, much like the Gamecocks also, we need a win. Columbia really needs a win. And just one, I mean, Charleston and Greenville have had multiple ones, but look what their first ones did. We just haven't had that. And so I think the mayor especially is doing a really good job of focusing on changing the culture here. The entrepreneurial culture, and he's celebrating every business that opens, which is showing Columbians that we are open for business. He's showing Columbia that we want your investment, we want you to grow. So I think that Does it help to have a massive manufacturer to bring a 22-year-old back? That in itself, maybe not, but the offshoots of that and the synergies of bringing other companies, et cetera, I think is huge.
Just to clarify, we've gotten 2 good wins in the last 5 years with Jushi and with Mark Anthony Brewer.
Those are good ones, right?
But they're good, but to get into the EV, which is the next generation of manufacturing, to what I think would be transformation. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Lawrence.
We hear a lot of talk about mega sites and billions of dollars and stuff like that, focus on grand slams, but I mean, this is the Midlands, for goodness sakes. Like, we've been trying to get grand slams for generations here. It doesn't happen. Fairfield County, for example, had a $6 billion hole in the ground, you know, from bad corporate actors and stuff like that. What do singles and doubles look like?
They look like home runs. They look fantastic. They really do. But we're designed around singles and doubles because that is really where the heart of the market is, right? And singles and doubles, is a beautiful thing. When we build 250,000 square foot buildings on spec, we are absolutely planning on multi-tenanting that in the event that we don't have a single tenant occupying the entire building. So we'll have 3 singles or maybe even 3 doubles in some cases, but they're all 3 occupants in one building or one investment. We thrive off of that as far as an opportunity that's the here and now. And so that could never, ever be missed out on in a community like Columbia. That's really the bread and butter.
I would agree, John. I mean, if we could, thanks for your question. I mean, in the office world, which is where I primarily work, if we had 4 new 30,000 square foot professional office tenants that wanted to be in downtown Columbia, we could locate them. That would be a home run grand slam for downtown, just in terms of the, the retailers seeing daily walk in, the professional, I guess the salaries, the residential housing, but just also, building that community, but would love for that to be new, right? Not coming from another part of Columbia.
That's a great question, and I think if we focus on the singles and doubles, then we got a better chance of getting the grand slams. That's part 1. I think part 2 is our definition of a single and a double starts to change too, as we focus on singles and doubles, and that would be the since I've given the mayor props. The only thing I would tweak about what a lot of what he's been saying about we need to get institutional capital in here. I agree with that. We gotta start it here. We gotta start with the singles and doubles. We gotta start with the projects that are under $30 million and saying that they won't touch. And once that becomes attractive, then they will come in. We don't want to. I think all efforts to date have been on the big mega site, big mega student housing project. Okay, it's gotten us some of those projects, which is great. But what about the small business? And I do think there's been a great shift to focus on. We're going to celebrate the opening of a hair salon, because that's a big deal. That is a single, and we need more of those. And I think the more singles and doubles we get too, the more we are able to retain some of the talent that's being here every year from USC, because it starts to change the culture and bring an environment that people want to build a business in. To me, that's the most critical thing is we can focus on this.
Derek,
Sure, thanks, Carl. Thanks for your thoughts, guys. Question, just thinking about the macro conditions in the last 12 to 24 months relative to project costs. We've seen 4% rates, cost of capital going up substantially this year. Talked a little bit about taxes earlier. Just curious to get you gentlemen's thoughts on just the cost of new projects in the near midterm. You're hearing folks that are looking around saying, hey, it's just a little too expensive to build now, or just talking in general.
I'll grab this one. The cost is up 50%, and the volatility that comes with it is the bigger concern. You have costs and they're stabilized costs. You can build a model around that. Nobody wants to build at a peak of 50% if they believe tomorrow is stabilized at normalcy, right? And so that's the bigger concern, I think, for the build-to-suit market. has virtually came to a halt because of that. Nobody wants to go out there and build into that volatile, high cost environment. The speculative market, which is taking some of the delivery risk out, is they're paying a premium to get access to that space, even with the higher cost structure, because the alternative looks too painful for them. But you're not seeing the build to suit market really come back because of what you're describing right now. And it's I mean, Columbia was a $4.50 Class A industrial market when the Class A product first started being built here. And that was it, and it was stable at $4.50 for a good bit. Well, I mean, those rents are, we've got $7 rents today because it has to be able to catch up with some of this crazy cost structure that's going on. $7+ rents and annual bumps on top of that bring in more revenue and help cover some of this upfront cost. I think what we're going to find doing through 23, and we're starting to see some evidence of it right now, the volatility is starting to come back to, I won't say normal, but at least more predictable levels. And when that happens, you're going to start seeing cost structures start to reduce a little bit. We are seeing some really small pieces of evidence of that, but I would expect this time next year, that same question, we can say, thank goodness we've got through that big cycle of volatility in a really high cost environment. But I will throw caution out there. When costs are here for 10 years and then they go here, well, they never go back to here. When the pullback is usually somewhere in between, right? And that's okay as long as we're pulling back and we're stabilizing and we're building models around it, both for the investor and for the tenants, because that's all part of their model as well, which is their cost structure, right? And real estate plays into that.
There's one question here that we need to wrap up. Frank?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you mentioned it a few times about Charleston, the wetlands issue, right? And the soil conditions in that layer, just in general, are changing because land's running out. Our firm is based in North Carolina, and there's no more mega sites. They just sold the last mega site, right? So the soil conditions are changing, which allows maybe not as fertile soil in the past, but much more enticing. I would say, what would be one thing that we could do as an area or a Midlands to change that environment to be possibly just that small little tweak? Because we don't have to be, you got Wolfspeed, VinFast, Toyota, all that's ate up every mega site in North Carolina. There's no more land ready. So we can be much more enticing than we had to be competitive in the past. What would be one thing that we could tweak here to bring that, make that, to hit a home run?
I don't know if there's one thing. I think in line with your question, what I would say to that is preparation. And that's both on the public side, some of the investment that Carl spoke about earlier on infrastructure, and infrastructure is a big topic, right? That covers more than just highways and back roads. But I also think it would be, the one thing would be, I think the private sector stepping up and doing more parks. And what I mean by that, if you come into Columbia, there's not a lot of what I would describe as Class A industrial parks, which they're expensive, they're risky. There's a lot that comes with that. But there hasn't been to date. So there's much more one-off development, meaning somebody goes out and needs 200,000 square feet of space, so they go find 35 acres somewhere, and 3 acres is wet and unusable, and they make the rest of it work, and it's the one-off development. But if we can get away from all these one-offs happening and centralize that into more of a park environment, I think that you've got something here that you can be a clearinghouse for business in the future. That'd be one way of doing that, but I think I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but I would think that'd be a way of preparing better than what we're doing today. But I would also say that's something that the private sector can do a better job stepping up and doing. This public sector keep making the roads better, keep making our port better, right? Let us come in here and do this. And I think as we create more singles and doubles and have more successes, people will start stretching their ability to get away from the one-offs and start creating things like 400-acre industrial parks, 500, 600. We're doing it right now with 100 acres over by the airport, but that's a smaller bite than I think our community could even support. Could go bigger, could go 500.
I did want to follow on.
Sure.
I've been covering South Carolina and North Carolina. One of the things they're having issues with in North Carolina, I was in Moore County. Fortunately, the week before, the big disaster that happened. They are concerned about affordable housing. If there's someone that we can show that we have affordable housing, they don't have affordable housing in Lake County. I think Southern Pines, their average house is $475,000. If we could sell affordable housing, I know we have more affordable housing here, then we could maybe even get some of the suppliers to come from that way. I'm just seeing a lot of housing issues. Wake County has issues, all the counties around Wake. If we could talk about affordable housing and maybe even bring some of those suppliers, it's not that far from North Carolina with all the development happening there.
The growth, we're seeing 20% growth in the population of South Carolina over the last 20 years. I don't think it's going to slow down much for the foreseeable future. That is going to be the topic for the next 10 years, 15 years is talent and affordable housing is correct. We're fortunate there. We've got a good market in Columbia. We need new product. We need new homes to keep up, but it's a lot more affordable here than it is in the upstate or low country. So good question, Anna. All right, I hate to wrap up, but it is time. I want to be cognizant of that, respectful of y'all's time. Gentlemen, thank y'all for sharing your insights today. Really, really appreciate it. Last thing, we're making the only consistent thing is change, right? We are making a change. So for 8 years, I think it maybe it's longer than that. The issues committee has been meeting the first Tuesday of the month. We're changing. We're starting 2023 differently, and we're going to be meeting in a new location, new time, new date, new format. We're going to start January 11th. The Girl Scouts, which is over on Williams Street, but we'll have a breakfast, and it's going to be a new format for y'all to come and enjoy each other's companies, enjoy breakfast, but also we'll have a conversation with some politicos to get ready for the start of the General Assembly. So be on the lookout. There are flyers that y'all could have picked up. Don't come here the first Tuesday of January. That's all I'm trying to tell you. It's going to be the second Tuesday. So the 11th, it'll be at the Girl Scouts. There'll be plenty of signage and there's plenty of parking. Second Wednesday. See how hard it is, right? We've been doing it for a long time. But we've done a lot of polls and we've asked a lot of folks what their insights are, but we think this new format will allow for a larger crowd, but get some time for networking as well. I also want to thank Melanie left before I had a chance to thank her, but the library's gone out of their way to be supportive of us, and we really, really appreciate them, their staff, for opening the doors and allowing us to be here. So anyway, I'll thank her too, but if y'all see Melanie, thank her for us. Susan.
Just want to tell and remind everybody we are celebrating small business. So go to the website, Twitter, any of our media, social media, great list of people who are being highlighted. And then if you go to the very bottom, it is an awesome opportunity for you to register for our drawing. And I'm telling you what, we have some fabulous prizes. If you win that, you don't have to go Christmas shopping. You just share well. So just please go look out. Everybody can do it. We appreciate and encourage you to do that. So thank you for your support. Happy holidays.
Thanks again to our panelists. We really, really appreciate y'all. And listen, y'all have a great, happy holidays. We look forward to seeing you the second Wednesday. Girls Thank you.